Hello. In today's tutorial with Ian, I want to show him further how he can develop children's interests in work from being first attracted to the tasks, through interest, through to concern, and finally, hopefully, through to some kind of a positive obsession, so that the children become really, really invested in the work they're doing. Now, as you'd realise, when we are dealing with drama, we are working not only with convergent thinking and the logical outcomes of matters, but we are also dealing with divergent thinking. The left and the right spheres of the brain are in operation together, constantly switching between them. And of course, drama allows us to inject a very direct human interest. We don't discuss supposing that, what about, and so on. We are actually saying, here we are involved in a situation which changes the social context of the classroom. The teacher is no longer always the one who knows and offers the information in a direct transmission way. Neither are the children simply enquiring. What it is a working laboratory. And today I want to work with Ian on these different levels that he can achieve of bringing human interest into, in his case, his junior classroom, later on a science project. Now, don't mistake what you are going to see now for the kind of activity pictures that you often find in drama books, because frequently they are made to seem very artificial, as if everybody's hyperactive the whole time. There's a great deal of activity in drama is cerebral. A great deal is imaginative. The skill of the teacher is to set it up so that the children can see that as they create and perform the tasks of the work, they actually get feedback from it, and this resonates right through their whole thinking and being in the circumstances that we're dealing with. Now, there are 4 kinds of bringing human interest into the classroom that I want to deal with today. I'll show them to you on the board. The first kind is when you actually bring a person into your classroom who personifies somebody for you. Now, they don't work as actors. What they do is they present the person. Now, what they offer, the teacher, is they obviously offer a high focus. People get very intrigued. The second thing is they will offer correct information. So when we come on to showing Ian how he might work in this way, obviously we must have the best material, the best information we have here. They will respond with feeling, that is, they will behave as if they are that person, but everybody will see they are not really. They will use relevant vocabulary to the way that person would behave in their time, if they happen to be a period person or if they're a craftsman, and so on. They will always speak in now time, the now time of the theatre. I am, it is happening to me. And finally, they will sign everything appropriately. Now, that then needs a body. You've got to have somebody. You may only have them for 10 minutes, but you need a body. This group are representations of human interests, and the last thing you need in these is a body. But you do need something to represent living people. Now, what you get here is quite different from the personifications. Here you have an enigma. You can create a lure. You can intrigue people. They will invite inquiry. They will promote tasks that have to be done around them. You can make the sign in the classroom extremely complex. It's very safe work. You can deal, as I will show you soon, you can deal with blood stains, for example, very safely, because you don't need real blood in a representation. And of course they can be very affected by the group. The group could draw on it, for example, whatever it is you represent. They can move things about. They can't really move a body about if they're a human person, because all kinds of matters arise then of invasion of privacy and so on. The third kind of bringing human interest in is when you present them with symbols. Now, symbols are particularly useful if you want to express the power a person has had or has, the kind of authority they may wield, particularly their interests that they had in their lifetime or they have in their lifetime. And, of course, it's very efficient because the symbol can have many, many layers to it. And the final group of presenting children with human interest is the signs. People have been here. Things have been left. Someone may come in and take them up again. Now, these always suggest a time lag. Somebody was here. Somebody may return. So in his tutorial now, I'm going to try to take Ian through a few examples, all of which I have personally used, so that he can get the feeling of what he might like to do when he comes on to his own project. So first of all, I've asked Ian to come in role as Emmeline Pankhurst. Now, as you can see, it's nothing to do with whether he's a man or a woman, because he's simply functioning with Mrs. Pankhurst's concerns. But he will speak and respond with feeling. I've put the emphasis on the gloves, because I don't want anybody to think I've got a completely fully dressed Mrs. Pankhurst and get confused about whether she really is or she really isn't. Now, there are two contexts in which I might use such a role. One is, for example, if I was working with junior children on a project possibly related with history and geography, looking at women who in their time have influenced. And, for example, a junior child age 9 will have only known Mrs. Thatcher as Prime Minister, and of course Mr. Major just recently. But we might look at Mrs. Thatcher as Prime Minister. How has she influenced the whole world? She has travelled the world and so on. Mrs. Pankhurst influenced getting votes for women. Florence Nightingale influenced our health service, and Boadicea influenced the British fight against the Romans, if we can call it British at that stage, and so on. Princess Pocahontas coming from America to England to visit Queen Victoria, and so on and so on. So in the context of many such people, getting children to look at women who've influenced their times. In a senior school, I might be interested to use Mrs. Pankhurst in order to look at those times in Parliament and how women got the vote. But I would be considering here that by meeting Mrs. Pankhurst, the students might themselves write a pamphlet about Mrs. Pankhurst's affairs, her life, how she felt about what she did, the sorts of adventures she met in trying to get votes for women, the sorts of colleagues she worked alongside, so that high school students could well publish for younger children very interesting, direct information about Mrs. Pankhurst. Now, you see, we don't trouble that Ian has to speak with a feminine voice at all. The children will have direct access to inquire of Mrs. Pankhurst what she does, how she does it, what she feels about how she does it. My job is to make sure that the children have a point of view from which they will enter the situation with Mrs. Pankhurst. Now, I'd like to show you two more examples of needing a body. If we simply take these away now, and we'll make Ian now into a stone, a standing stone. We need a body because the stone has to be able to reply. I'm simply going to drape this across. I'm using this because I've got it. Now, the stone can remember all the things that have happened close to it. So if you think of Big Meg in Cumbria, The stone is this. The head would be turned away and simply dropped. In this context, we can inquire of a piece of territory. What do you remember? What games have been played? Have people ever quarrelled near here? What kinds of things have you heard? What animals have grazed near you? And so on. Again, the children must enter with a point of view. The standing stone will span, should you wish it, 2,000 years. Mrs. Pankhurst can span her lifetime. She can consider the future. She knows something of the past. This stone will never have moved. It will have seen the land change. This offers you a totally different social context. Now let's try a third one, which needs a body. This time, I'm asking Ian to represent a dying elm. And so, if he sits, the face that's presented now is the rings. And he is elm. That's all he needs. He is elm. The stone knows nothing of growth except the lichen which may spread over it. But the elm knows the seasons in a totally different way. The elm knows that sap rises, leaves fall, birds nest, and air moves constantly around and through the tree. The tree knows something of heights. The tree will know those who have sheltered under it. The tree may span 400 years of time. Again, the children need a context. Is it in the context of pollution in the atmosphere? Is it in the context of those great gardeners who planted the trees? Is it in the context of town planners who put trees to give horses shade, and buses don't need them the same way, though people do? Is it in the context of trees breathe? And so there are three examples where a human person can be activated to speak. Now I'm going to try to show Ian the second layer. If we just put these to one side, what will happen with this second layer then is that we have enigmas. So let's have a look at this enigma. We need to represent, this is in the context of music studies. The children are going to make a musical evening based upon the sort of music a person might meet in their lifetime. It was a group of adolescents who considered this, and they chose an 18-year-old to have died quite tragically on the moors when she was lost. Here you see we represent a human. Now Ian, I'll invite you to do what I invited the students to do. Will you draw her lifeline from the womb to the coffin? Now you see the lifeline can double back on itself. Sometimes we find we repeat the patterns. So while Ian is drawing the lifeline, here you see we can be considering what kinds of music will such a person have found themselves coming into contact with. Does she have a Walkman? At what stage did she have a Walkman? So you see, you can put the Walkman in, the point where she maybe got a Walkman for her birthday, and some children get Walkman very young these days. Yes. Did she hear any music in the womb? What about all the nursery rhymes? It's a way of focusing attention, a human concern, into the creation of a music program. It allows people, in this case it certainly did, to bring in their own tastes in music, of course, as well as allowed me to inject mine, because I could be her mother, because I can speak as her mother as we work. She will become very real. She will be given a name. She will exist for us. And our music program will honour her life. So there is an example of a representation. You can't ask a person to lie down in a classroom and pretend to be dead. It's nonsense. Neither can you draw their lifeline on them. But this is completely coherent. Now, I'm no good at art, so of course I do what I can, the best I can. But do you see the resonances? The coffin is black. And again, I've simply used different colours because I don't want to suggest either a white person or a black person. It doesn't matter. The photocopier always copies them black anyway, so you get that dark tone. Now let's have a look at some more representations, Ian. This is a means of bringing a person into the classroom. This is a letter. A letter will usually bring a person in. This was written for 7-year-old children who had to do a science program on light and paper. Greetings to all the Benedictines in your monastery. As Bishop of the Holy See of Chichester, it is my desire to found a holy house of women in Chichester Cathedral, to be called the Nunnery of St. Mary Magdalena, and so on and so on and so on. The business about the letter is that the bishop can include every single piece of science the class teacher wants the children to engage in. He wants a book to be made. She wants to make paper and ink. He wants the book to stress the Benedictine rules and especially their services throughout the day. She has to teach the 24-hour clock. She will use the medieval none, vespers, and so on to use this. Monks need a 24-hour clock, though they may not call it the same as we do. She needs the scriptorium to be enlarged because she wants a lot of careful measurement on area, and she wants particularly a time and motion study on how much space people need if they're writing with a stylus, and so on. She also wants to get the science of light in because the windows are very thick in Durham Cathedral, and their cathedral is modelled on Durham. And so also she's able to get the bishop to explain what an illuminated manuscript is. You see, he says, I have seen manuscripts which have been made by you, finely illuminated with beautifully patterned borders and illustrations. And we would be grateful if you would produce such an illuminated book as the nuns require. The letter is so efficient at creating a tremendous number of jobs in a quite small space. And of course for 7-year-old children, as this was designed, a lot of talk about what kind of man the bishop is and what sort of standards he would have allows the teacher, in changing the social context, to not sound bossy. It's the bishop who's going to be bossy. Later, someone may come to represent the bishop as Mrs. Pankhurst was represented. It may be the head teacher. It doesn't matter who the bishop is, as long as they know this is a representation and they can present their book. So they have a ceremony for all their work. They have somebody to teach. They can show the bishop round the scriptorium. They can show the manuscript. They can explain their lives, you see.
Yes.
Now here is another representation. This was chosen by 9-year-olds. This represents a child in the 12th century who has been badly beaten by the reeve. This was in the context of the laws that are secular and the laws of the church which applied in those days. It was a church school and the children were examining just how the power of the monks was to block the reeve. We couldn't beat a child. We were trying never to break our vows, never to tell a lie, but what do you do when a reeve comes in looking for somebody you've hidden? So this was laid on the book trolley, and it was covered with the book trolley cloth. It was our fruit cart. And when the reeve came and wanted to search it, how do monks manage quickly? We don't know what the reeve will ask us. The reeve is the teacher. How will we manage quickly never to tell a lie? And later, it was pinned, if I might just use you again, Ian, pinned on the back of one of the children so that we could talk to the child about what life would be like if he chose to come and live with us. If he didn't wish to return to the village, what would life be like? Another way in which monks can explain to somebody else their life. It needn't actually be a person. It could be just pinned up on the back of a chair or over a sweater. It is a representation of a human. Once that is accepted, we have a new novice in our monastery. We don't need a body to fill it. We need it in our mind. Thank you very much, Ian. Now here's another one. And this is a very safe way of dealing with what might look like a horror movie. Throw your coat down there as if it's been dragged. And then just drop these blood stains on it or around it. We are representing a death, a quite horrible death. In the context, in this case, of looking at evidence, of learning how to watch something and drawing conclusions from it. So the context here, you see, the one I have used in this instance, has been, okay, when police officers are in training, they've got to learn to use their eyes. Right. Now, I've got these back from autopsy. I mean, the bloodstains have never been moved. I asked for them to be left. The thing is, we've got to work out just what we think happened. You see, we are dealing with sign. We can extend it so much because we give ourselves the right to use representations. You may say, oh, what a lot of trouble it takes. Well, it didn't really, because everything made is recyclable. I recommend you have a filing system. You'll never use it in the same way again. Make some blood stains, store them away, label them blood stains. They'll look a bit funny. And one day you think, that's just what I need. Never again will you use it in conjunction with that coat or training the police, but as a means of resonating and signing again, you see, it may be quite useful. Now, the last one in this section, that again is a little bit different, I want to try to show you, is this. We have to take this off rather carefully. Now, this was used with 9-year-old children, looking at archaeology and how scientists write reports. But it was in the context that the children were writing a book. They were writing a biography of their king. Their king was an Iron Age king. And of course we had invented our country, we'd invented our king, and we'd started to write the story of our king after his death. And of course he was the best king anybody'd ever had, because we were only 9 years old. He never did anything wrong. So I felt, this is too good to be true. You know, kings are not. I can't believe all this. So in order to just get this one, move towards the science now, but also challenge them on the fact that kings can do no wrong, I took a situation which I know arose in Maiden Castle, where a skeleton was found with a spear through its spine. So, of course, I had a letter, again I wrote it myself, coming from a famous historian who had read their book and had said he found it rather odd that in a tumulus in their land, he had once dug up, and was sending evidence of this in a photograph, he had once dug up a skeleton, and there was evidence that a spear had been put in through the back, not through the front, and that the man had been found in a dungeon with a dead horse. And how could they possibly explain this if their king was as good as all that?
Yeah.
So this caused us to learn that historians constantly review their understanding in the light of new information. And sometimes this may mean a whole rejigging of things. Again, you may think, well, it takes a long time. It didn't really, because another class did it for me.
Right.
And it will be used. I have to iron it regularly if I'm going to use it. Never will I use it in the same way again. So, those are the kinds of representations. That man can live now because we found his skeleton. This horse can exist because we could find his skeleton. The king exists because we've written the book.
Yes.
The historian exists because we've sent a letter. All these become people in our minds, and if we then want them to get up and walk about, we can say, well, it's drama. By our will, we will say, supposing that now, today, we will take the day when he was led to the dungeon, and we will consider why a king would put a man and a horse together in a deep dungeon, and the problems of getting a horse down there. Why is it necessary to hide two? Why not just destroy the evidence? And so on. Now the third section, you see, they indicate the power and the authority. Now, if we just cover these so that we don't get them flying all over the place, here now we are dealing with symbols. Now, symbols represent not so much the people, but the sort of authority they may wield. Now, these are pretty poor swords. I've just made them out of paper. When I actually used these, I had good swords. It was one of the occasions when I needed really good ones. Can you imagine a group of 6-year-old children who are watching television in Australia because there is a series on about King Arthur? Now, of course, I thought King Arthur would be something like we think King Arthur is. Well, it wasn't. I got it all wrong. However, a queen who comes along to some 6-year-old children and says, do you think Merlin should put the sword of laws into the stone, or the sword of wars into the stone? There's a modern question. And so the children discussed what Merlin should do, and Arthur begins to live. And so does Merlin.
Right.
Because the question is very highly focused. It isn't this a nice sword and isn't this an awful sword? But what do we mean by the sword of laws and the sword of wars? So their drama can explore this. They chose, after a lot of discussion and a lot of action, what do wars cost and what do laws cost? So there's a fair amount of fighting, though not rushing about and hitting one another. Creating the wounded after wars. Painting the wounded. Making a gallery of images to show the king. Before he draws the sword, which shall he draw? Writing laws that are good for people, because it's only by having all this ready to show the king he knows and can take guidance, you see. Now here is another symbol. This is the mason's mark. A man built this building. Somebody was here before. This place has known human voices. Who was this man? What was he building when he was putting these stones together? What beliefs did he hold as he builded well? There can be other evidences, of course. It needn't be old-fashioned. It can be a modern mason's mark. It can be sandwiches and bits of plastic, cups, bottles of beer, whatever.
Right.
It can rekindle the life in the place because it begins from here. It's interesting, isn't it? A question I might ask is why people leave their marks. What it can tell us about this, about craftsmen. This could well be in the context of examining modern craftsmen, interviewing modern craftsmen. But there's one you can do on a bit of brown paper for a start. This one has been used in a geography context of water divining. The sign is here, waiting for the diviner to come along and help us to find water. Or we are the diviners who will find water. This was used in the context of geography, getting the vocabulary of the geographical elements in a watershed, as in the Rocky Mountains and so on. But you see, the human interest, the mystical interest is there as well. It's all right to know all the names, to have them correct. That kind of knowledge is exciting and wonderful, and we need it. Alongside this kind of knowledge, the mystery. And this is what drama will allow you to do. This will deal with real tools, real men, and so on. But it will also deal with the mystery. It will take you into the guilds, for example.
Yes.
And so on. And this one was done, again, in the context of a grave. It's simply some broken shards of pottery. Signs, symbols, in this case, symbols that someone has been cared about enough to be buried with pots. What does it symbolize? What sort of people were they who would fill pots with grain and oil and place them there? So again, you have humans. If you have those, you have humans. You have those who brought it there, and you have those who lay there and were laid there. Along with the skeleton, then you can move straight to the Iron Age, because you can lay the skeleton in Iron Age terms and so on. We're always resonating. We're always in context, and the children will always enter with a point of view. It is never, come and have a look at this. It's always a carefully constructed point of view from which they will enter the circumstances, and it's like a torch shining in. And that then spreads as you shed the light round, as it begins to reverberate and widen the circles of interest, you see. Now, the last group are signs that people have been here. Now, they are not symbols. A symbol is always more than what it represents. It is not a sword is a sword. It is a sword is the symbol of power to operate as a king.
Right.
A vessel is a symbol of the journey after death.
Right.
The diviner here is the symbol of the authority, that the rod needs the man needs the rod. Now, a sign can stand for a particular person, if you wish. But these are all powers and authorities here.
Right.
The clan, the sociological, you see. Now, if we look at signs, here are some signs. Now, they are not symbols. We breed horses, and if they have hooves as big as that, that's the sort of horse we breed.
Right.
And so if you want to buy a horse from us, I always have to worry about getting these hooves in the right way. Anything that fits that is one of our horses. So you see, that's a sign. You can see them on our door. We run a Shire horse breeding establishment.
Right.
We breed the best Shire horses. And you can always tell, I mean, now just bring this one forward. Now I'm signing, and I'll just walk her over, you see. I've got to get her to fit the hooves. I'll just walk her over. Now I'm signing, these are signing. And when those are there, we know there's going to be a horse put there. We lay them out whenever we're going to bring a horse in.
Right.
And the children always did it. I mean, this was their pride and joy. From that sign,
There's a horse. Yeah.
they knew how big. Shire horses are massive to small children, you know. I mean, for me, they have to be like this, so they're big enough for the children. You see what I mean? Right, that's one sign. Now let's have a look at this one. You recognise this straight away, Ian. There's Man Friday, if you wish. You know.
Yes.
Everybody knows about Man Friday and Robinson Crusoe. A terrible sign that we thought we were alone and
Right.
somebody's been. If you look at Alan Garner's stone book, he uses signs superbly. When Mary goes into the cave that her father's now too big to enter, when she comes back and he says, "What did you see?" She says, "Hundreds of feet marks, hundreds of feet marks, and a hand that my hand just fitted."
Right.
Because she was just the right size to be an apprentice. So in the case of this, you see, the
Yes.
sign is what Mary saw. The sign became a symbol when she found the bull painting. When she found the footprints, she knew a lot of children her age had been round here,
Yes.
untouched by time, all through the generations, the signs of generations. But when she found the bull painting, there was a symbol of the power to hunt.
Right.
You see what I mean
Yes,
now?
I
You're
think-
beginning to see the
yes.
difference. Now here, you see, we have another sign. We have a prisoner scratching something on a wall.
Right.
Now I've just invented this, but that prisoner will live because we found some S's for F's for S's and so on to give a bit of a hint. The sign of the times, as you might
Right.
say. Pity the poor prisoner. No light my fight hath not, but all light so swift to go. You could build the building round it. Now I don't think that's
Yes.
particularly clever. In the light of famous prisoners,
Yes.
and it's already happening in Iraq. Signs are being found now of the way people have died and so on. So this enters people into the past very easily. It enters people very graphically into how it must have been
Yes.
to be living under those conditions. And another sign here, you see, it is not a symbol. The context makes the sign.
Yes.
Here we have a hoard of coins. The sign that somebody was here and buried them. They're just simple, made out of milk bottle tops and chocolate papers. But the sign we find. I once worked with some 9-year-old children on the Backworth treasure, because the most perfect Roman patera ever found in Europe was found at Backworth in Northumberland. And I worked with children who found the sign that Romans had been. People had been hiding things, and finally we found the Backworth treasure in the 18th century and took it to the British Museum. Northumbrians are still arguing about that it ought to come back here. And so you see, you have all these 4 ways. You can choose what feels safe to you.
It's difficult to understand the difference between the coins as a sign and the vessels as a symbol.
Yes, yes. It's the way they will enter the circumstance.
Yes.
If I ask the question, shall he have a sword of law or a sword of war? It is asking a symbolic
Right.
level question.
Yes.
But if I say, he's going to his coronation, I don't know which sword you'd like him to have on today, then you're dealing more with a sign, you see. So it's according to the level. Obviously, that can become a symbol if it can represent more than itself.
Right. Yes.
If it only represents a man lying, or a woman, of course, lying here, learned enough to write in 1643, then it is a sign that that person existed, and such circumstances existed around that person.
Yes.
The person will live in our classroom because we find that.
Yes.
If it were a symbol, he may have to leave a mark of some kind that says not only was it me, but my power was of this kind, you see.
Yes, I'm with you. It would tell us something more about the person.
Yes, I suppose. I'm just trying to think how I would turn that into a symbol. Because, you see, I've designed it to be a sign.
Yes.
So for it to be a symbol, I think it might have to have possibly a Christian cross. Or a wizard's mark. Some kind of, I can't remember the Kabbalistic sign. Now it becomes then symbolic. There's more to this.
Right.
This person wasn't only just a man or a woman. It was a man with a very special interest and concern and power. You see. I think we always get confused. Because you see, look, that's a sign that I'm married as far as you're concerned.
Yes.
But it's a symbol to me. I don't take it off. So signs are what other people often read, but symbols are what you know. And that, you know, that's a good example.
Yes.
But this would never be a symbol. It's a sign to you I've lost half a finger.
Right.
But it doesn't symbolise to me never get into motor cars because it once happened, you know, anything like that. So there you are, you see. You've got another layer of ways of bringing the human element in. And really, they're pretty simple, don't you think?
Yes, yes.
And it's the chance to perform the tasks that arise because of them. You see, this skeleton, I would never lay out like this on a table in a classroom. It needs to be laid out to consider the full size of a horse. And it is accurate, as accurate as I can make it. Though I haven't actually, you know, had every bone in the hand is there, but they haven't all been cut out. Because for that age of child, it was important to be able to see that is a hand.
Right.
Because skeletons have a certain aura about them, you see.
Right.
The fact that it's brown paper is no problem whatsoever. The last thing you need is bones, you know. And the fact that they fly about a bit doesn't much matter. People become very, very careful. Now, you could never represent that by having a human person there.
No.
Now, I call this teaching through the conventions. Each one is a convention to represent, and it's totally coherent. It's absolutely coherent. Provided my mouth, where it's placed in your classroom, we were looking at your model, the task the people are going to be engaged with, you were engaged in drawing a lifeline. I might put that in a cardboard box and say, will you shine a light through this little hole and see if you can read what the prisoner wrote? I can't turn my classroom into a dark place where there is no light. It's been designed to have a lot of light. And I don't want all the tricks of theatricals in a normal classroom because we're busy doing lots of other things. But by putting it in a box with a little hole in and talking right, I can get an agreement that when you put your eye to the hole and I shine the torch for you, it is a dungeon. And a person once lay there. Now, I wouldn't put the person in because it wouldn't be in my right to have the person that they should invent. And as soon as I put anything in to represent the person, I've coloured it either by period, the colour of the fabric, the shape of the garment. I can't do that. It's their right to create it, you see. This skeleton, if it was 12th century or earlier, I mean, if we're talking about Newcastle, then you see it would have to have been folded in the way that a skeleton would eventually lie when starved unto death. And the same with the horse. Now, I've never seen a man lying as if starved unto death, but I've got a good imagination.
Yes.
And there's plenty of books around that would enable me
Yeah.
to find it.
Right.
But you will always have to remember you require a contract. You have to say, would you agree that? Now, in the case of the skeleton, you see, I said, would you agree that under this cloth a body can be found, only bones now? So they said, well, yeah, because they're reasonable.
Yes.
It is reasonable. Well, then, let's have a look at it. Then you know what we're going to dig up.
Right.
Now, a lot of people will say, oh, don't show them the skeleton, let it be a thrill. No, no, no. Show them the skeleton, let it be a thrill there, and then cover it up. And then they'll wait to find it. They'll work at much greater depth because they know what they're going to find. And it's, will we find this corner first or that corner? Will somebody's pick strike it? How will we manage to work so carefully as archaeologists that we never destroy anything before it's found? You see what I mean? And so, look what a rich store of
Yes.
possibilities you have.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes, thanks. Yeah.
Now, next time, we'll have a look at framing,
Right.
because you've got a lot of different points of view you can use from which people can enter the situation. Okay?
Right, thanks, yeah.
Good.